On this episode of Inner Light, we are joined by Kristin Knudson, fractional CMO, strategist, and founder of Ease Experience, who blends the wisdom of universal laws with real practical tools for leaders. She helps mission driven businesses grow with authenticity, ease, and energy that inspires. Today, we'll explore how presence, communication, and alignment can transform the way leaders create impact. Welcome to the show, Kristin. It's such an honor to have you.
Thank you, Anna. I need to bring you into my home and have you introduce me to my children. That was very sweet. Thank you.
So, Kristin, you say the energy of who we are shapes the world around us. How do leaders begin to notice the energy they are actually bringing into their teams and work?
It is such a tough question. How do leaders know the energy that they're bringing into their work and the people around them? I think that the first thing is to look in the mirror, right? Everything we do is shaped, who we are shapes everything that we do. Let me rephrase that. And that's called the law of mentalism. So the law of mentalism means what I think, who I am, how I embody actually creates the world around me. There's a sociologist called Morris Massey, I think it's pronounced Massey, and he did a lot of work that actually is the cornerstone for how leaders communicate within their companies. And he said that by the age of 17 or 19, we are who we are. Like fundamentally, we are who we are by the age of 17 or 19. And that's kind of crazy if you think about it. If you look back to all the childhood experiences that you probably had, or your listeners, if you think about the childhood experiences that you had before the age of 17 and 19, that shaped who you are. So, oh my gosh, if I look at my 17-year-old self and how I handled conflict, no wonder I get nervous and shut down when someone is confronting me about something, right? If they feel aggressive, because I had some experiences in my childhood where I didn't feel safe. So we immediately go back to who we were when we were our younger selves. So if you think about how you show up in the world right now, a lot of us like to play victim mindset. A lot of us like to think, oh, it's so-and-so's problem. They're the problem. I've got the answer. We all think with our ego that we know what's right. But in reality, there are many different variables. And so if we're constantly defaulting to who we were when we were 17 or 19, no wonder there's so much discord in the workplace. And if you look at what is the common denominator that causes companies to fail, teams to fall apart, people to get frustrated with each other, projects to stall across the finish line, it's because teams don't know how to communicate with each other. And if we look back to who we were when we were 17 and 19, I don't know about you, Anya, but I was pretty immature. I didn't make the best choices at that age. I was very formidable still, but that's who we default to under pressure. So the law of mentalism tells us that everything in the world around us is a reflection about who we are in our core, about who we are on the inside. So if we want to create in a scenario where there's discord in the team and there's chaos in the company, or maybe your relationships with your spouse or your friends or even your children are just totally volatile and dysfunctional and just don't feel peaceful and ease. The real question is, why are you feeling like that on the inside? What is causing that on the inside? Because if you can deal with what is in here, you can change what is out here. It always comes back to you as the root of the problem or even the solution. But if we look at, so if I know I'm the problem and the solution, and I know that the world around me is shaped because of how I am dealing with things internally and mentally, right? My heart and my mind. Then I also know I have the power to create something different. I have the power to change. And so that comes down to things like vision boards and, people talk about manifesting and all these different amazing tools that you can use to change your perception, to change your reality around you. But holy crap, that can be really flippin' hard. It can be hard to know that you default to wanting to run under difficult circumstances and still walking into a room to address conflict head on in the boardroom or in a one-on-one meeting or maybe at home with your spouse. So how do we deal with that? Well, it's micro steps. It's smaller changes because you still got to walk into that room. You still got to deal with your kids. You still got to deal with your spouse or, your coworker or your employee. So let me share a little story with you. I was a single mom and I was living paycheck to paycheck. This was years ago, and had just come out of a really, really nasty relationship situation where I was feeling very victimized, very abused, and just had trouble feeding my children. And just, I was in this tiny little apartment. And I remember sitting on the floor of that tiny little apartment and seeing physically the world around me. The physical world around me reflected my internal being, which was I felt depressed, I felt victimized, I felt scarcity, I felt restricted. I just, all this icky, like this. I felt so small. Okay, well, how do I change the world around me when I feel like this? So I started with mentally visualizing. Jim Carrey is a great example of this. He, as we all know, is an actor. A long time ago, he decided, I'm going to write myself a check for actor services rendered or something like that, $10 million. And he visualized it every single day. And then lo and behold, 5 years or something like that later, he got the exact number for Dumb and Dumber. So that is an example, a real world example of visualizing to create a different reality around you. Now, when we look at, okay, how do I apply that to myself? It's really hard. Like, okay, if I wanted to win the lottery, I'll just visualize winning the lottery every single day. But it has to do with how we feel. It's not just what we think and what we want to see. We actually have to believe it and feel it in ourselves to change the world around us. And bear with me, this really does exist with how you deal with your teams and how you deal with your clients and in your relationships. So I spent time looking at, okay, I'm going to visualize being calmer with my children because that's a micro change, right? That's a micro change I can make right now. And I can feel that. I can immediately feel that in my being. Now I want to experience joy with my children. I'm still in my tiny little apartment. I'm still struggling financially. So I started dancing with my daughters, both of them, in the kitchen. We'd have kitchen dance parties in the evening. And it's a tiny little kitchen, and I'm 5'11". So we would twirl and everything, and we made it work. We had so much fun. I created magic in our space, and oh my gosh, that felt so good. Okay, that was a micro change, and I felt it in my being. What else can I change? What else can I change? I was doing all these little things, and I started to feel lighter. I was still in my tiny little apartment. And then I realized, okay, this experience isn't going to change until I physically move myself out of this tiny little apartment. And so I did. I took a job, gave up everything, moved us across the country, and physically moved myself into a new space. And because I was physically in a new space, I was now able to visualize and see a different reality and then create an even bigger one and create a bigger one and a bigger one and a bigger one from there. So sometimes we have to look around us. Okay, if I'm in my office and I'm feeling really crappy and the projects are stalling and the clients are really icky, it is as simple, I promise you, it is as simple as standing up, twirling 3 times. I know it does look silly. I do it with my kids too. It sounds silly because it looks silly. And then moving your physical being into a new position, a new place, a new environment. It could just be the room over. It could be a coffee shop. It could be actually saying, hey, let's pause and let's reconnect tomorrow. So you can be physically in a different space. Because then that can now shift the reality of everyone's energy around you. Because if you change, the world around you has no choice but to change. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I love that. Also, that's such a powerful reminder that leadership starts from the inside out.
Yep. And it's also the mirror law too. Are you familiar with the universal laws?
I remember them, but not exactly.
Okay. I really only know, I only know like 25 of them about how to apply them. There's so many more, and then so many more that the masters of the universe, beyond that even, I'm sure, because the universe is so, so vast. But the universal laws are powers that be that are actually at force within our lives. So the law of mentalism, what we just talked about, that exists, right? You can't physically see it, but it is the truth. It's just like gravity. So if I saw a 2-year-old go and climb a bookshelf and he believes he's going to jump off it and fly because he believes, X, Y, and Z about things, you can bet your ass I'm going to run after that 2-year-old and I'm going to grab him, because what exists that is true that he can't see? Gravity. It's going to pull him down and he's going to get hurt. So you don't need to believe in gravity to know that this is it's just going to happen. And that's what these universal laws are. They exist within our world, whether we want to acknowledge them or not. And they're constantly at play, sometimes in our favor, sometimes it feels like it's working against us, but they're constantly involved in everything that we do. And so that was the law of mentalism that we discussed. There's also the mirror law, it's the law of correspondence. And it means that which is on the outside is also on the inside. So everything is an absolute reflection upon who we are and what we do. And we can learn from that, right? If I'm struggling and feeling frustrated or failing at something, my perception of failing, I look around me and I'm like, okay, what are my kids doing right now? What can I learn from that? What are my clients doing right now? What can I learn from that? How is my team working together? How are they talking to me? Oh my gosh, that's a huge one. I once had a gal that I was communicating with and delivering things on Slack. And then all of a sudden I got all caps, right? And it's text. I mean, we can laugh about it now, but when someone's sending all caps, they're yelling. So I felt very disconnected from the situation. Like, it is what it is, So I gave her all caps right back. And then she was like, whoa. And again, we do laugh about that now, but it's a perfect example. What is happening outside of us is information for how we are actually being right now. So I have another example of the mirror law at play, which is really interesting too. I worked with a client who defaulted on all his contracts. So he had contractors that he would hire, come in, do a service, and he'd work with them for a little bit. And then he decided that he wanted to move on to different contracts. So he would not fulfill upon that contract. He would not end up paying them in the end. So what then happened that we saw in his business is that a lot of clients were not completing their contracts. This was like a year-long program what people would sign up for. So they'd do it for a little bit and then they would have an excuse or some way to try and wiggle out of their contract and not pay the full amount. I thought it was really interesting. And then it actually progressed to him defaulting on payments, not paying his bills. And he stopped being able to make payroll for his employees. Then he stopped valuing his employees altogether and not paying them. And then we saw his clients actually not wanting to sign up, not wanting to move forward at all anymore. It was really interesting. So that founder of the business was choosing not to pay, was choosing not to honor contracts, was choosing not to value his employees. So then that was then reflected back on him with all of his clients and his employees as well. I mean, the business completely crumbled, all because of his choice of how he wanted to show up. It was a complete mirror. And that's the law of correspondence, the law of the mirror law.
Yeah, absolutely. But also, what's one way a leader can start identifying these patterns in their own organization?
Practical ways to apply the universal laws is really honestly just sitting down and asking yourself questions. I truly believe that the best leaders just ask a crap ton of questions and they're never satisfied with the answer. There always has to be more. And so instead of asking, why is so-and-so doing X, Y, and Z? Why doesn't my team listen to me? Why don't my employees want to work as hard as I do? Why doesn't my clients value the services that I provide? Instead of asking those questions, ask instead internally, why am I, let's say, for example, your team isn't listening to you. How am I not helping my team feel that their ideas are valuable? How am I not showing my team that they are safe to provide information here, or they're safe to speak up and give answers? Because it all comes back to the root of who we are. And if a leader is incapable of seeing past their own ego, is incapable of believing that they are the root of absolutely everything in their organization, their business will not succeed. It will hit a certain cap. It will feel frustrating. It will be anxious. It will have lots of turmoil. You'll have high turnover within your organization if you aren't able to see past your own ego. It's the leaders that understand that they are the precedent for everything that happens underneath them. And if they create a culture that is positive and honest and inspired, then your team is going to want to show up that way. If you create a culture of squeezing and blaming and dictating and trying to control every single outcome, as opposed to allowing people to be free to show up who they are and provide their own creative input, then you're going to get the result of a business that cannot grow. It just won't be able to. So it all comes down to questions, the questions we can ask ourselves to look at ourselves and what do I then need to change in order to shift from this restricted zone into this all-encompassing creative incubator. And it goes back to thinking about, I mean, you've probably heard the studies about how plants grow in environments. There were studies done where some plants were said horrific things to, kept in a space and just talked to negatively, and they did not thrive. But then plants that were spoken lovingly to, appreciated, shown gratitude, played classical music, those are the ones that thrived. People are the exact same way. If you have a person that is withering in a space, then you need to change the space that they're in. You need to give them better soil. You need to give them nutrients. You need to fill them up. If you have a team that is thriving, then you know that you've done a really great job of creating an environment that they can be who they're supposed to be. Because at the end of the day, a leader is not as good as who they are individually. They know that they are as good as the team that they bring around them. Some leaders believe that they need to be the best in the room, and those leaders are going to fail because you can't know everything. The best leaders understand that I am not the best at X, Y, and Z. I have an idea and I know how to help my team grow, but I need to bring in the best at marketing. I need to bring in the best at chief of people to keep people inspired. I need to bring in the best of technology, because those minds together, that's what creates the success. So it's understanding that you cannot do it alone, and you shouldn't ever be able to, because there's no such thing as someone who is perfect at everything. And that's the ego. So if we can get past that ego, we can definitely create teams that are environments that people want to be a part of.
Yeah, and like that perspective turns challenges into feedback, not just obstacles.
Exactly. Yep. It's always feedback. And, that feedback can feel like an obstacle. I mean, let's just be honest. Sometimes it's not fun facing what's in the mirror. And I mean, think about when you wake up in the morning. I don't know about you, Anya. These bangs, they're like this when I wake up. I put on foundation for a reason. I'm aging. I'm 43 years old. So sometimes what we see in the mirror isn't always what we want to see, but it's the truth. And if we can accept and work with the truth that's there, then we can inspire others and we can show up authentically. And it's that authentic show up that creates real connections that allow us to share our light with the world. And at the end of the day, I really believe that that is the best that we can do here, is to, how can I help? How can I show up to help? Because that helping is what makes a positive impact. And whatever that looks like, right? Everyone has different ways of helping. A stay-at-home mom, she shows up and helps every single day by helping her children grow into who they're supposed to be and keeping a safe, nurturing home. You've got people who work in the workforce, right? They show up every day and they can help by being the best in their field, providing the best service. Hotel staff, and when you're on vacation, have you ever met someone at the front desk who's just, oh my gosh, does not want to be there, or even at the airport, doesn't want to be there? That can send you down a whole wave of discomfort and have a negative impact over the next XYZ days. Or if you show up and you're happy and you want to be of service to the world, that has a different type of impact. It's that butterfly effect. And I believe every person who's listening, every person in this world has a purpose. And that purpose is meaningful. And if we can show up authentically and understand who we are and embrace that reflection in the mirror that's shown in the world around us, then we can make a better impact as we show up.
Yeah, 100%. And many businesses run on hustle and burnout. What actually happens when that energy fuels a team or a company?
Are you speaking of the burnout?
Yeah.
So when the burnout is fueling the team in a company, you're going to see things like projects are going to stall. You're going to see discord within teams. You're going to see a lot of conflict as opposed to cooperation and as opposed to, making impact and getting projects across the finish line. Everything's going to start to crumble. And then that can have a ripple effect on whether you're service-based or you have clients, that has a ripple effect on whatever your organization is made up of. And so if you have a team that is facing burnout, then they're emotionally feeling very restricted. They're like this. So then guess what happens to your budget? Your budget also goes like this. And then what happens to your marketing results? They start to go like this. Your cost per acquisition for your ads goes up. The people that are coming in don't have the money, the funds, they're too broke, if you will, to buy your services. They don't feel value in it. So everything starts to squeeze, and that squeeze starts trickling to everybody that employee is working with. So the best thing that you can do if you notice that a team member is experiencing burnout is to ask questions. How can I help support you? And you have to think about, okay, why are they actually feeling burnout right now? Is it the job? Am I asking too much of this person? Do we need to get them help? A lot of times what it comes down to is an employee or a team member is not feeling listened to. They don't feel like their values mean something, or their ideas mean something, that they're not valuable, or that they're not being heard, or that they just don't have enough experience. And so you have to look at, okay, if they don't feel they have enough experience, then I'm going to give them the resources, the tools in order to gain that experience. If they feel like they're not being heard, someone's calling all the shots. And that's a whole nother conversation to the person who's calling all the shots. Are you having open, honest conversation in a positive, nurturing environment so that they can then feel that they're coming forward, being heard, and they're having an exchange of values? That open, honest, and direct, positive, nurturing environment, that comes from my mentor. I did not make that up. His name is Roy Camerano. He is phenomenal. And that helps leaders understand the best way to communicate within their organizations, how to help people move from conflict and move into cooperation and collaboration and actually getting things across the finish line. So again, if that employee is feeling like they're burnout, it comes down to questions. It's not the employee problem. It's not that the employee is doing a crappy job or they're not in the right spot. It's that I've failed. I've actually failed at helping them feel supported in what they can execute. Because if you think about it, if you are inspired, I'm telling you, I wake up mornings so inspired that I'm up at 4:30 a.m. I'm up at 4:30 in the morning and I am pouring into things, creating, writing, setting goals. I'm looking at my day. I'm so excited. And I'll do that, all the way through the day until my kids, they've got volleyball in the afternoon and the evenings, make them dinner, we go to bed. I'll get up and do it again. 4:30 in the morning, naturally wake up because I'm inspired. But I have been in positions, I've been in leadership roles where I have felt that burnout. And it doesn't matter how much sleep you get, wake up at 8 a.m., still sleep through the alarm, don't feel inspired to show up for work. Why am I not inspired? That's a question. Why is your employee not feeling inspired? And oftentimes it's because they don't feel valued. So how do I make them feel valued? Because they are. And you have to think about employees too. They're like eggs. They're fragile. Okay. They're so fragile. Clients, customers, they're a little bit more hardy, but you have to take care of your team. You have to take care of your employees, because a cracked egg is just going to shatter and it's going to spill everything everywhere. But if you hold it delicately and care for it, then look at what you can get. Amazing scramble, or you end up creating a chicken. Interesting analogy that I just gave you. But it's a great reminder how fragile employees are, and remembering that they are valued, and that if they're feeling burnt out, it has nothing to do with who they are and everything to do with the environment that you've created for them.
Yeah, absolutely. But also, how can leaders begin shifting, like from burnout energy to one sustainability and flow?
Sure. So again, that comes back to conversations, asking questions, and being so to shift from burnout into actual flow, that is difficult. So it's a great question, Anya. And I think a lot of people think, okay, if I do X, Y, and Z, boom, I'm in flow. It doesn't work like that. It goes back to the law of mentalism again. It goes back to that mirror and the questions that you're going to ask yourself, because everyone's a little bit different. If everything around you in your business, in your home, in your relationships is a direct reflection of what is happening here and here, then you have to address what's happening here and here. So it comes back to those questions. Sit down with a journal and ask yourself, what is my problem is X, Y, and Z. Okay. How is X, Y, and Z showing up personally for me? How have I personally exhibited this behavior myself? So, for example, if you have an employee that is combative when you give feedback on something, okay, that's friction. That is not moving projects forward. That is feeling drained after meetings. So if that is the problem that you want to look at, that you want to move into flow from, I would then take my journal and I would sit down And I would ask myself, okay, so this is my problem. So-and-so is combative whenever I try and give feedback. And so the projects aren't actually developing to the creative level that I need them to. I know that it's not so-and-so's problem. It's actually my problem. So when people give me feedback to change something, how am I combative? What do I do? Okay, that's interesting, Kristin. So I respond like that when so-and-so gives me feedback. Why do I respond like that? Oh my gosh, you're taking me back to 17 and 19 again. What do you know? What is the root of that? What happened around in my childhood around that time that made me feel that way? That's interesting. Okay, so what positive came from learning that behavior? Now I have gratitude. Now I have gratitude for that experience. So now I can look at, okay, if so-and-so is feeling combative and they're a direct reflection about who I am, because we know the law of mentalism exists, what do I need personally to not feel combative? How do I approach it? What do I wish so-and-so would do so we could have a different outcome? So, and then you have to also look from that employee's point of departure too. So this is very layered. This gets really tricky. It's a lot more than what a 40-minute podcast episode could be. But we layer it in and we look at, okay, so point of departure. I am a very concrete person. I can take an idea and actually see it in my brain and then put it into reality. Not many people can do that, but that's one of my gifts. And so for me, if I'm having a conversation with someone who is only conceptual and never grounds it down to earth about how we can actually take the next step, what's the next step forward? I get really frustrated. I feel like they're not listening. I feel like we're not making traction. And oh my gosh, I'm hitting a wall. All we're doing is up here in the clouds. Let's bring it down to reality and make something happen already. But if a conceptual person is hearing me talk about all the granular details of X, Y, and Z to make something go across the finish line, it's like way too much for their brain to handle. So we have to understand that there are so many different types of people in this world who have so many different filters, and all those filters exist because of all the experiences that we've had up until the age of 17 and 19, and then any additional huge emotional events that occurred have an impact on that as well. And so think of all the different layers of filters that people are processing things through. And then you have to think about that egg, about how an employee is an egg. And so I have to be careful and approach them carefully. And so if we can take the opportunity to pause and to breathe about what I know to be true about this person, most people always want to help. They always want to do the right thing. At the end of the day, you can have differing opinions in the room, but they always want to do what's best. So if we can then look at, okay, what is the best, what is the outcome that we want to achieve together? And vocalize that. Talk with that employee. Hey, I know that we're both trying really hard to accomplish X, Y, and Z. And there's so many different ways that we can do it. So let's work backwards. If we're trying to accomplish X, Y, and Z, what do we need to be here? And then here. And so if you have them move out of their filter of how they think boxed in something needs to be done to the possibilities that there are other possible ways, and they're now focused on the goal as opposed to the actual track, you're going to have a different type of conversation. And that's when flow happens, because that's when creativity comes in and takes over. So if you think about when you're manifesting things too, if you've got manifestors that are listening on this call, you know that if you think, okay, I'm going to make an extra, let's say $1,000 this month, and you think it's going to come specifically from this way, is that ever how the universe shows up? No, the universe has a far bigger plan than our human minds can ever conceive. And so when we look with that employee, that relationship, that whoever it is that we're working with, we're having conflict with, if we take it out of how we get to this place to this is the place we're going, and the conversation is now focused on the goal, it changes the entire dynamic. You're going to see shoulders drop. You're going to see people hips come forward because they're leading more from their creativity center. You're just going to feel the ease in the room because it's the mode of transportation mentally and emotionally has now changed.
Yeah, like that's so relevant, especially for listeners who are stuck in push mode right now. So, what a rich conversation with Kristin, reminding us that leadership isn't just about execution, it's about energy, presence, and alignment. When we shift the energy we bring, we change the results we create. For anyone feeling weighed down by hustle and grind, today is your invitation to lead with more ease, clarity, and light.